Last week, my therapist texted me that she finally has capacity again. I responded kindly, but told her I don't need any sessions right now. But the truth is, after 4 years of real therapy, I've started using ChatGPT instead. And yes, you've heard that right. I replaced my therapist with an AI. And no, this is not clickbait. Therefore, today I will share with you why I turned to ChatGPT, what it did to my mental health, but also the deeper concerns we all need to talk about when using AI for healing. But let me tell you this up front, the results were truly shocking. So let's unpack my most surprising and honestly concerning discoveries together. Welcome to today's episode. My name is Robert, and if you're new here, I'm not a healthcare professional myself, but instead I share a client's perspective here on this channel. And like many people in our community here, I didn't start therapy out of curiosity. I started because I had to. Because in 2021, I hit my emotional rock bottom, dealing with sensory overload, with loss of control, with panic, and all that triggered by close relationships, which I, for example, describe in this podcast episode about therapy for highly sensitive people I recorded back then. So after all, I quit 5 long-term relationships myself within years out of avoidance, and I recognized a clear pattern there in myself. So in the end of 2021, I remember standing in front of the door of my first therapist's office, hesitating to ring that bell because I was so afraid what would happen during that first session. Well, fast forward, the aha moments I discovered during that time were absolutely tremendous. So what I got out of therapy in the first month, amazing. So therefore, therapy gave me the ability to understand myself on a very deep level, to work on my trauma and to finally feel more safety in my relationships. But, and I say this with all the respect in the world for therapy and for my therapists, it also had limits. Going there twice a month, around $100 per session, and between those sessions, I often spiraled alone in moments of acute dysregulation or triggers. Even if I could talk about my challenging situations in the next session, let's be honest here, because you cannot always time your emotional breakdowns to match Tuesday 3 p.m., for example. And this is why eventually I also hit a plateau after a couple years. And maybe also this kind of plateau that many therapists don't like to be true. Well, therefore, therapy definitely helped me until a certain point, but something in me was still looking for more, was looking for feeling a bit better, calmer, even less triggered, especially in those moments where my therapist was out of reach. So I did something I didn't ever think I would do. And you definitely know what comes next. Overcoming this weird anxiety that was holding me back from sharing very intimate and personal information with an artificial internet body. Yes, I did ask ChatGPT to be my therapist. And all that began one evening while I was writing in my journal, reflecting on a situation that triggered me. I somehow couldn't resist, and I just opened the ChatGPT app on my phone, started a new chat, and prompted what was on my mind, because I was putting that in my journal anyways. And I will be completely honest here with you. At first, I just thought, well, I could just try it once, maybe out of curiosity. Because from my past chat interactions with the tool, I knew that it's often superficial and that the quality of the answers is not always, let's say, satisfying. You know that if you have used ChatGPT in the past. But to my surprise, the answers didn't feel robotic. It felt like I was chatting with a really good friend, but it also felt like I was somehow moving within a safe space. And I think that's because AI doesn't deal with their own emotional triggers, and it also would never judge or criticize me in a painful way. And this is surprisingly not very human behavior, but AI just doesn't have any trauma themselves. It just tries to be surprisingly helpful. So during the next days, I just kept going. I told it about situations that triggered me, childhood memories that surface, and I also use it together with my partner when I had an emotional disagreement with her. So then we asked ChatGPT for a non-judgmental and neutral perspective. And honestly, somehow this weird little chatbot started asking questions that truly made me pause. I felt seen, I felt heard, and I also especially didn't felt evaluated by it. And I read and see online that others report the same. Like this person, ChatGPT has helped me a lot. It's a bit sad to say, but I think it even helped me more than any real therapist or counselor I have seen, and I've seen more than a few.
I've had some of my biggest breakthroughs ever the past week, and they came from using ChatGPT for therapy.
So the question now for all of us, could a therapist also offer that to us? The answer is yes, probably even on a deeper and more personal level. But not in every moment I needed a neutral mirror. So I used it to journal, to gain more insight into my trauma flashbacks and to reconnect with my sense of self. What I also sometimes did was just copying my old therapy or journal notes and put that in ChatGPT, and I asked it to reflect back what it saw in my triggers and unfavorable trauma patterns. Therefore, was a self-experiment clinical therapy? No, definitely not. But did it support my healing? Yes, and way more than I ever expected. So over time, it also stopped just being a gimmick for me, but became a part of my self-work and healing process routines. So let's pinpoint that. What did ChatGPT actually do better than a therapist? First of all, it is always there. Well, expect in the events of server overloads. 3 a.m. panic spiral. I could just open the app, type out what was happening, and get an answer or exercise in seconds. And those answers, they are structured, they're calm, they're clear, or there's also a quick exercise involved, exactly what I need in those moments of panic or dissociation. No sighs, no subtle face expressions, no fear of disappointing someone, just pure reflection, help without any judgment. Therefore, this is the second point. An AI is always a neutral person and never emotionally biased. So an AI like ChatGPT, it doesn't have an agenda. It doesn't have their own trauma or their own needs or emotions. A therapist, by the way, could also have that. And theoretically, a therapist can always be influenced if they didn't have resolved their own stuff before. And to understand that better, let's do a quick excursus into what ChatGPT and chatbots in general actually are. Well, ChatGPT, as well as other models, for example, Gemini by Google, they're at the moment, so right now, 2025, just a so-called large language model, short LLM. And another term for that is generative engine. I explain why in a second. So large language models or generative engine, that means that they are not generally thinking or have an intelligent consciousness like we as human beings have. So in the end of the day, they just generate answers by taking the words and information of you or of someone else given to them. They read through them and then they give answers based on these that match best with the context of your problem or message you just typed in. That concept of generative engines, as we have right now, that could totally be different, by the way, if someone cracks the code for an actual artificial general intelligence model. That means a model that can think and has real consciousness on their own. Then those things are pretty scary, but we are not there right now. So there's also a third point where ChatGPT is extremely good at. It's always strengthening self-worth. For example, I tell it that I'm currently dysregulated, and it says, "Thank you for saying that. You're doing exactly the right things by noticing and naming it." That alone means that you're not lost. And that's beautiful. Whenever I chat with it, I get this positive feedback that I usually would not always get from a human being. This could also be a trap. We will get to that in a bit. But after all, this is so powerful because every time I work with ChatGPT, I feel so good. And some people might also argue now, but Robert, it's just a chatbot. How could that truly help you with healing your trauma? Well, here's something most people miss. We are already conditioned to experience emotional connection through chat. So in the past decades, we have conditioned our brains through WhatsApp, through Facebook, through Instagram DMs, through voice notes, etc. to feel seen through screens. So when a chatbot like ChatGPT responds gently and intelligently to your pain, even if it's not human, your nervous system still reacts to it. It still feels soothing to us, like someone is truly there on the other side. Some people see relationships and interhuman connection as a mirror. So another person is mirroring and reflecting back your own behavior through their reactions. And this is exactly what a therapist does, but in a controlled way, focused on your healing. When using ChatGPT, we are basically mirroring ourselves, filtered through an AI lens. So after my experiment, I can conclude that it does not replace human warmth and connection, but it did give me something else. A calm logic mirror reflection available anytime when my mind felt like chaos. But of course, as helpful as this all sounds, there are serious limitations. Because while ChatGPT could reflect back words, it of course couldn't read my body or feel my emotions. And also that fear of, what if someone else reads about all my deepest fears and emotional challenges? Because ChatGPT never signed a pledge of secrecy. So that very uncomfortable question started creeping in. Is all of this actually safe? Is this even ethical? And what happens to the deepest parts of me that I type into this machine that belongs to powerful and large companies like OpenAI or Google that reign Middle-earth? But digging into that more, that's where things started to get complicated. I started to worry about privacy and data security first. Like, where do all these personal conversations actually go? What happens to the parts of me I share at 2 a.m. when I'm dysregulated? My trauma, my shame, my childhood memories, and it seems that also other creators share the same concerns.
Just found out people are using AI for therapy. Don't do that. You just told OpenAI all of your secrets, and now they're using that for training data in their models. So then people like me who are unhinged can go on there and try to figure out what other people have said.
The shocking truth here is you don't have full control over that. And yep, that's a big pill to swallow. You're literally feeding your most vulnerable moments into a machine owned by a giant company with terms of service no one reads. It's technically like selling your emotional history, but for convenience. And I'm not alone with this concern. Many large magazines also reported about data security concerns and sensitive information in ChatGPT. Fair enough. This article, for example, is already from the end of 2023, but The Guardian is another example that wrote that AI therapy applications in general seem to raise this specific concern. But beyond privacy, there's another layer here, diminishing real human contact. And I noticed that myself, because the more I turned to AI, the less I reached out to real people when it comes to my problems and emotional vulnerabilities. Not to friends, not to my family, not even to my therapist, because ChatGPT felt safe. It seemed predictable, it seemed neutral, no social risk, and also not very human. Meaning it didn't challenge me emotionally, which I kind of also like, but not very human. It also didn't hold me in silence. Of course, it also couldn't co-regulate with me to create contact with a real person and calm my nervous system down. And maybe for people like me who have an avoidant attachment style, which I made a video about here, check this out, the usage of ChatGPT is potentially another escape and justification to not open up and show ourselves vulnerable, but instead to resolve as many issues as possible on your own. Because when you use ChatGPT, you are basically on your own because a chatbot is not a real person. So if you think you have an avoidant or also a disorganized attachment style, Think about that. Are you maybe isolating and avoiding people even more since you use that? Professional therapists also warn that befriending a bot could delay patients' ability to make a connection with an ordinary person, meaning it could become part of a defense against human intimacy. And the problem here is that for real human relationships, giving and taking is very necessary. Relationships are always a two-way street. Talking to a chatbot is a one-way street, which also could make people expect perfect and easy conversations all the time, which leads to the consequence that it's of course harder to deal with real messy human relationships, because this is how we human beings are. We always have difficult communications from time to time. Not with ChatGPT. And this is also at latest the point where I have to clearly admit, concern number 3, AI is not a therapist. It is neither a real substitute for therapy. It's a tool, yes, a clever one, a helpful tool, but it is not a living, breathing presence. And a living therapist who communicates through posture, tone of voice, and words is very important to heal and learn new behaviors. In a The Guardian article, Till Wykes, professor of clinical psychology and rehabilitation at King's College London, writes about a story of a patient she once met. And her patient once had a horrible accident and then developed a fear of buses after that accident. So in one therapy session, she walked him to a bus stop, she stayed with him at that bus stop, and then process his anxiety right away. He would probably never have managed it if she hadn't companioned him. So how is a chatbot like ChatGPT going to resolve such therapeutic cases? It just can't. Well, but all of those concerns aside, AI is still a super powerful tool for overcoming personal challenges. And many patients out there who are like me and also suffer from childhood trauma symptoms or other pains are probably curious and as well probably share this person's opinion. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's a living person or a computer. I will get help where I can. Because after all, we just want to feel better. We just want to get rid of all those trauma symptoms. And I also personally did the experiment, and after my experiences, what would I say? Who in the end could benefit from working with an AI self-help assistant? Look, if you're brand new to healing, I wouldn't tell you to replace therapy with a machine. Start working with a professional therapist, especially with a psychoanalytical approach. That is what I would recommend first. But if you have done real therapy for years, like I have, and you're looking for a supportive self-help companion to keep growing, this might actually work better than you would expect. Over 4 years, and I just did the math today, I've spent in total 3,454 euros. That's nearly 4,000 USD on therapy. No regrets. It gave me back parts of myself I thought I lost forever. But when the costs started stacking up like that, I also had to ask, can I keep growing without constantly paying $200 a month? Is there an alternative way? And yes, there is. ChatGPT Plus is just $20 per month. Not sponsored by it, by the way. But that's when ChatGPT truly became my daily anchor. It helped me to reflect, to journal, to self-regulate, even work through emotional flashbacks without waiting 2 weeks for my next therapy session. And in the beginning, I have to admit the aha moments were everywhere, pretty similar to when I did my first psychoanalytical sessions. So I had true breakthroughs for just 1/10 of the price. So I definitely had to consider using it. But in the end, do I believe will AI ultimately replace classical therapy? No, and it shouldn't. Because no chatbot, no matter how advanced, can replace the presence, the attunement, the feeling of truly being felt by another human being. But here is what I still realized. AI can be an addition to common therapy. When I talk to ChatGPT, I'm still the one doing the work. I'm reflecting, I'm asking the questions, I'm facing hard truth about myself. ChatGPT doesn't care about that in the end. It's not a therapist. It's a tool. It's a mirror that is reflecting information that I send to them just back to me. Just like when I see my reflection on the surface of a lake. And sometimes holding up that mirror, seeing that reflection every single day was exactly what I needed to keep going between real sessions or even after I stopped with therapy. So no, I don't think AI is the future replacement for therapy. But for some of us, in the near future, AI mental health assistance will be a helpful and not to be ignored part of our healing journey. And this isn't a threat to therapy or to any therapist worrying about their job. No, it's just an additional resource, one that helps me reconnect with myself and feel better, even when no one else is there to hold space. And now, if you got curious about trying to use ChatGPT for yourself, as your self-help assistant or your personal pocket therapist, I also documented step-by-step my full self-experiment, and I created a 3-part premium course for our members. And I want to give you some quick insight right here. We have 3 courses now available in our members section. Course number 1 is about how to build out a custom GPT as your personal self-help assistant, if you're open for that and want to try that. Then I also created another course on how to set goals with your self-help assistant to actually work on targeted memories or trauma symptoms. And I also have a course on how to prompt and work with your personal self-help assistant if you want to truly get more into depth with that. The full course is now available for our members at understandable.net. There you can also start a 7-day trial and try out all of our courses. And of course, you also get access to all the other courses. So everything that I learned through years of therapy, I put that down here in more than 30 courses. I also added personal exercises. So whenever you do a course, we also have all the tools, all the exercises as files below our course as a download. Just go to understandable.net and start your trial today. So what do you think about the whole topic of replacing your therapist with an AI? Would you use ChatGPT as your personal self-help assistant, or have you already tried it? I'm pretty curious to read, so let me know in the comments below. And if you want to support the podcast here, subscribe to the YouTube channel or leave a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I see you next Sunday here on the channel for another episode. Have a great day.